Joining me is Carla Howell. She's executive director of the National Libertarian Party. Carla, it's really great to talk to you. You know, we've had a lot of libertarian guests on this show, but usually to talk about a specific issue, not about the Libertarian Party platform. So I think a good place to start right now is we hear from a lot of libertarians in different flavors, right? So some will send us email, and I get the picture that they're for more freedom, and by more freedom, they mean less business regulation specifically. Other libertarians seem to go way further than that and actually say, you know what? The fact that we even have taxes is coercion by the government because we've got no choice not to pay them. The fact that this constitutional form of government has been imposed on us is in and of itself coercive and basically questioning the entire infrastructure. What's the official platform on those issues?
The Libertarian Party exists to make government small, a small constitutional government that is limited to our life, our liberty, protecting our life, our liberty, and our property, and nothing more. Now, there are libertarians who disagree about how far to go, but most of us see that we're dealing today with a absolute gargantuan big government. I mean, there's hardly words to describe how big government is, and it isn't going away anytime soon. It's going to take a lot of dedicated work just to turn around the growth of government and start to move in the correct direction, which is much, much less government. So many of us just really are focused on that. We have such a huge job ahead of us, and we would be thrilled if in our lifetime we could make substantial reductions in big government to get it down as small as it should be. Gee, anything's possible, but it certainly isn't happening tomorrow, shall we say.
So how about on taxes? I mean, give me your sense on that. Is the position that the government imposing taxes is in and of itself coercive?
It is a fact that government is an instrument of force. I mean, that is a fact of the nature of government. It is force. Is a certain amount of government force acceptable to protect our lives and liberty and property? Many people would say yes. Many libertarians would say yes. Some would say no. The real issue that we're focused on is how can we dramatically and immediately reduce big government, cut out major taxes, small taxes, remove and dismantle bureaucracies, regulations, repeal laws, wipe them off the books, significantly defund government, reduce its spending and taxation. There's so much to bring troops home, reduce our amount of involvement in foreign affairs so that we're focused only on defending the United States. That's the job ahead of us. It's a huge job.
Why is that? Make the case that that's objectively good. In other words, completely backing off from the specifics of what government is doing, why is government doing less objectively a good thing?
Spending less, for one example, is a good thing for the economy.
Tell me why, though.
Every dollar we take out of government, which is wasteful, bloated, inefficient, often doesn't fulfill its goals, often doesn't even define what its goals are, and move those dollars into the productive private sector is going to stimulate the economy. These phony government stimulant packages are the opposite of what's needed. They make things worse. They kill jobs. They waste money. They direct money into the wrong places where investments are not needed rather than into the areas where they are. You move that money to the private sector, and entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, individuals, mutual funds, and others will invest that money where it is most needed, do a far better job than government will.
Well, let's analyze that. That's a lot right there. So let's analyze that a little bit. It seems that the problem I have with that statement is it's too broad for me. In other words, you talked about getting down to the government just providing the safety. For safety for this country. And the problem I have is that there's some government spending that is really not very stimulative. And at the top of that list, actually, defense spending is on that. However, there's some government spending, like, for example, food stamps, that is known to have the highest economic multiplier effect of any type of spending that we can imagine. So people who get food stamps are basically spending 100% of that money. The cash registers that money is going into don't distinguish whether it's a government dollar or a private dollar. That goes back up to the suppliers and the farmers growing that food. So don't we have to distinguish a little bit?
It may be true that some government spending is less wasteful than others. That's probably true. But and the more visible it is, the less wasteful it is. There's so many areas of government that no one even knows that the government agency exists except for the people that work there and a handful of others.
Mostly
so
in defense, which you want to keep.
Well, most of defense we would reduce. It's dramatically bigger than it needs to be. We can dramatically shrink the size and the spending of the military. We can bring our troops home from hundreds of thousands of troops stationed in Germany and Japan. Didn't World War II end a little while ago? Why do we still have troops?
I agree with you on that.
Japan? There's healthcare has all kinds of hidden costs. Almost every area of government. Plus, just open your phone book, if you still have an old paper phone book, and look in the blue pages, as they call it. There's the white pages, the yellow pages, and the blue pages in some phone books list the government agencies. And it's shocking to look to see, even in state and local governments, how many of them there are that no one's ever heard of. The news isn't reporting on them. No one's checking on what these people are doing, whether they're doing more harm than good. And so there's very little accountability, huge amount of waste. Most of them are doing more harm than good. So another important aspect of government spending is jobs. Government spending, including the so-called stimulus spending, actually kills jobs.
How?
When you move money out of the wasteful government sector into the productive private sector, for about every job that you might need to lay off in the government sector, you're going to create 2 jobs in the private sector.
Exactly.
Now, why is that?
How does that happen?
It happens in different ways, but primarily, government employees are overpaid. There's study after study shows they're overpaid, and it's not usually in the wages. It's somewhat in the wages. Their wages are actually higher than their private sector counterparts, but it's mostly in the benefits, their retirement packages, especially their health care benefits. Now, what's happening in a lot of government agencies around the country is they get to retire. Government employees get to retire after 20 years of work in some cases. Many of them retire when they're younger than me, in their young 50s. There's cases where they get to retire in their young and mid-40s. Many, on average, they're retiring about 13 years younger than their private sector counterparts. So you have people who are retired and they're getting generous payouts.
Well, there's a couple of factors there, though, Carla. We have to consider that
let me just finish my point here.
Okay.
So what you have is these people take retirement at a very young age, and then they go and hire someone else. So you're paying effectively for 2 able-bodied people who could be working when only one is actually working. Whereas in the private sector, you can't get away with that. I mean, it may happen rarely, but in general, it doesn't happen. Nothing like it does in government. So you're paying too much. You're often paying for 2 people to do the job of one.
I want to touch, because we do have limited time, back on the taxes thing a little bit. I'm getting the sense that you are way more reasonable on taxes than some libertarians I've spoken to who say that the fact that you have to pay taxes is coercive, period. And my view is, listen, taxes aren't really coercive. You have a lot of choices when it comes to taxes. You can choose not to work. You can choose to be a tax protester. You can choose to petition the government to change how the tax system works. Or you can leave and you can go to any of the other 200 countries. So I think that the argument that taxes are inherently coercive isn't accurate. It sounds like you agree with me.
Well, yes and no. They are coercive. They're an instrument of force. Government is an instrument of force. And no one gets away with paying no taxes. There's nowhere in the world where you can get away with paying no taxes.
But let's stop there. We need to stop there, though, Carla. Just because there aren't other countries where you can avoid taxes does not mean that American taxes are coercive. It has nothing to do with American government that there aren't other governments where you avoid taxes. That can't be part of the argument.
Well, it's true that that's not what makes it coercive, but government by its nature is coercive because everything government does, whether it's taxes or rules of regulation, are backed up by penalties, imprisonment, and other instruments of force. So government is an instrument of force. Now, whether it is justified in some cases is another question, but it is unquestionably by its nature an instrument of force.
I don't know about that because people have agreed either because their parents, when they had custody, chose to give birth to them and raise them in this country, or via being naturalized in their adulthood as a citizen. You're essentially signing the social contract there to say, I'm going to live under this paradigm of government. So people have agreed, they have an option to not be part of this government's alleged force, right? People have agreed, have chosen to do that.
Many people could flee to another country. Some people probably can't for various reasons. But the real issue here, this is not really the focus of the Libertarian Party. What we want to do is shrink government in every way we possibly can. I headed a ballot initiative in Massachusetts, 3 of them actually, and 2 of them were to end the income tax completely in that state.
I remember that, yeah. We're in Massachusetts.
Okay, now what happened there was we got 45% of the vote the first time we did this. That was, this is with no advertising and very little publicity, and most people not voting. And the people who don't vote are much more in favor of tax cuts than the people who do on average. So here you have in liberal big government Massachusetts, 45% of the population saying, sure, get rid of the income tax. There's a lot of popular support for what we stand for. And when you explain it clearly to people what we're for, which is shrinking government, that's what most Americans want. They want a lot less government, and that's what we're working for. LP.org is our website, and we encourage people to join us. We're the only political party in America that is serious about cutting government. We run candidates who run expressly on platforms of cutting taxes, cutting regulations, reducing big government's intrusion into our lives. That's what the Libertarian Party is about.
All right, so, Carla, we're going to have to agree to disagree, but I am interested in the Libertarian Party platform. It's really great to talk to you. We've been speaking with Carla Howell, Executive Director of the National Libertarian Party. I would love to have you back. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.